The gunshot echoed across Dead Ridge Mountain just as Lin Yu reached for the cabin door. Inside, Coulter Graves stood with his revolver aimed at the ceiling, eyes wild with 3 years of grief finally tearing him apart. The widow froze. She'd been hired to cook meals, not talk a broken cowboy down from the edge. But something in his hollow stare told her they were both drowning, just in different ways. This is the story of two people Winter tried to kill, and how they refused to let it win. If you're watching from somewhere cold and lonely tonight, drop your city in the comments. Let's see how far this story travels. Now hit that like button and let me tell you what really happened up on that mountain. The cabin stank of failure. Coulter Graves kicked the door open with his boot, arms loaded with firewood that was too wet to burn properly. It didn't matter. Nothing mattered much anymore, and hadn't for a long time. 3 winters he'd been up here alone, watching the ranch his grandfather built rot from the inside out, like a corpse nobody bothered burying. He dropped the wood beside the cold hearth. Dust rose in the late afternoon light, slanting through windows he hadn't cleaned since Rachel died. Her needlework still sat in the basket by the rocking chair. He'd stopped seeing it months ago, just another piece of furniture his eyes slid past on the way to the whiskey cabinet. The bottle was already half empty. He couldn't remember opening it. Outside, the horses were probably hungry. The chickens definitely were. Coulter stood in the middle of the room, arms hanging at his sides, trying to remember why he was supposed to care. The ranch had 40 head of cattle scattered across the mountain somewhere. Maybe 30 now. Wolves got some. The rest just wandered off because he'd stopped fixing the fences. His reflection caught in the dusty mirror above the mantel. A big man going to waste. Beard down to his chest, hair past his shoulders, clothes he'd worn for 4 days straight. At 36 years old, he looked like something that crawled out of a grave. Rust Hollow was 2 hours down the mountain on horseback. He hadn't been there in 6 weeks, maybe 7. Time moved different up here. Days bled together like watercolors in the rain. But he was out of coffee, out of flour, out of salt. Out of whiskey, too, soon enough. The realization hit him sideways. If he wanted to keep drinking himself to death, he'd have to go down there and face people. The irony wasn't lost on him. He saddled Bravo just after dawn the next morning, when the world was still gray and his head was pounding. The horse was patient with him, more patient than he deserved. Coulter had been a hell of a horseman once. Won prizes at the county fair, broke the meanest broncs in 3 territories. Now he could barely get the cinch tight without his hands shaking. The ride down took longer than it should have. He stopped twice to vomit in the brush, and once because he forgot why he was moving. By the time Rust Hollow came into view below him, the sun was high and hot, and he regretted every decision that led him here. The town hadn't changed. Same crooked main street, same saloon where the ranch hands drank their pay. Same general store where Mrs. Henderson would look at him with those pitying eyes that made him want to put his fist through something. He tied Bravo outside Morrison's Mercantile and stood on the boardwalk for a full minute, gathering himself. Through the window, he could see Old Man Morrison behind the counter, measuring out nails for somebody. Normal people doing normal things. The gap between their world and his felt impossible to cross. The bell above the door jangled when he pushed inside. Morrison looked up. His expression went carefully neutral in that way people's faces did when they saw Coulter now, like they were trying not to react to something dead walking around in human clothes. Coulter. Morrison's voice was even, professional. Been a while. Need supplies. Coulter's voice came out rougher than he expected. He cleared his throat. Usual staples, coffee, flour, salt, dried beans if you got them. Sure thing. Morrison started pulling items off shelves, not quite looking at him. How's the ranch holding up? It was a kindness, that question. They both knew the ranch was dying. Fine, Coulter said. They conducted the rest of the transaction in silence. Morrison tallied the items. Coulter counted out coins with hands that trembled slightly. The store owner's eyes tracked the shake, but he didn't comment. Small mercies. Coulter was loading supplies into his saddlebags when he saw it. A small paper notice tacked to the board outside the post office. Handwritten in careful English, the letters precise but uncertain. Seeking employment. Experienced cook and housekeeper. Widowed. References available. Will work for room and board. Inquire at the railroad camp boarding house. L.U.A. He stared at it longer than made sense. Around him, the town moved like it always did. A wagon rolled past. Somewhere a dog barked, but Coulter stood frozen, reading those words over and over until they stopped making sense individually and became just shapes on paper. He needed help. The ranch needed help. These were facts he'd been avoiding with the same dedication he brought to avoiding everything else that mattered. But hiring someone meant letting someone in, meant having another person see how far he'd fallen, meant conversation and expectations and all the exhausting performance of being human around other humans. His hand was reaching for the notice before he decided to move. He pulled it down, folded it carefully, tucked it in his coat pocket. The boarding house sat at the edge of town where the railroad crews stayed before moving on to the next stretch of track. It was a sad, tilted building that smelled like boiled cabbage and coal smoke. Coulter stood outside it for a long time, horse's reins in hand, trying to figure out what the hell he was doing. A Chinese woman was sweeping the front steps. She was small, maybe 30 years old, wearing a simple dark dress that had seen better days. Her hair was pulled back tight, and she moved with the kind of efficiency that came from a lifetime of work. When she saw him, she stopped sweeping. Her face went very still. "You Mrs. Yue?" His voice came out harder than he meant. She nodded once, grip tightening on the broom handle. "I'm Coulter Graves. Got a ranch up on Dead Ridge Mountain." He paused, realized he was looming over her, took a step back. "Saw your notice. About work." Her eyes flicked to his face, then away, studying him without seeming to. He was used to that look from women. Not interest, just calculation of threat level. "What kind of work?" Her English was careful, accented, but clear. "Cook. Housekeeper. It's just me up there. Place has gone to hell. I need—" He stopped, started again. "I can pay room and board plus wages. Not much, but it's steady." She didn't answer right away. The silence stretched out until it became uncomfortable. Coulter shifted his weight, suddenly aware of how he must look. Smell. When was the last time he'd bathed? "How far is ranch?" she asked finally. 2 hours by horse. High up. Snows heavy in winter. It's—" He searched for words that weren't warnings. "Isolated." "I see." She set the broom against the wall with care. "You have wife? Children?" "Had a wife. She's dead 3 years now." The words came out flat, factual. He'd said them enough times they didn't cut anymore. "No children." Lin Yue nodded slowly, processing this. Behind her, the boarding house door opened and a heavy-set white woman stuck her head out. "Lin, those sheets won't wash themselves." Lin Yu's jaw tightened, but her expression didn't change. "Yes, Mrs. Cooper." The door slammed shut. Lin Yue looked back at Coulter with something new in her eyes. Not hope exactly, but the careful consideration of options when you didn't have many. "When would I start?" she asked. "Soon as you can pack your things." She studied him for another long moment. He made himself hold still under the scrutiny, let her look. Whatever she saw, it was enough. "Tomorrow morning," she said. "I come here, you pick up?" "I'll be here at dawn." He turned to leave, then stopped, looked back. "It's hard living up there. Lonely. Cold most of the year. If you're expecting—" He gestured vaguely. "If you're expecting anything pleasant, I should tell you now it ain't." Lin Yu's expression didn't change. "I am widow in America with no family and no money. Pleasant is not what I expect, Mr. Graves. I expect work and roof and food. You offer this?" "Yeah." "Then tomorrow I come." She was waiting on the steps when he arrived the next morning, the sky still purple dark in the east. Everything she owned fit in a single cloth bag she held in her lap. That broke something in him he didn't know still had feeling, how a whole life could shrink down to fit in something that small. He dismounted, tied his horse, stood there awkwardly trying to figure out the logistics. He'd brought Bravo because the horse was steady, but he hadn't thought through how she'd actually get up the mountain. "You ever ridden a horse?" he asked. "No." "Of course not." He rubbed his jaw, thinking. "You're going to have to ride with me then. Bravo can carry double, but it's a long trip." She stood without comment, shouldered her bag, walked down the steps toward him with the same practical efficiency she'd brought to everything else. No hesitation, no questions, just movement toward the next necessary thing. He swung up into the saddle, then reached down. "Give me your hand." She looked at his outstretched hand for a moment, weathered, scarred, twice the size of hers. Then she gripped it and let him pull her up behind him. She settled onto Bravo's hindquarters, bag clutched against her chest, body rigid with discomfort. "You gotta hold on," Coulter said. "Trail gets rough." Her hands touched his waist with the lightest possible contact, like she was handling something that might bite. "Hold on proper," he said. You fall off, you're gonna break something." Her grip tightened fractionally. It would have to do. The ride-up was awkward and silent. Every time Bravo navigated a rough patch, Lin Yu's grip would tighten reflexively, then loosen again once they were on level ground. She didn't make a sound the whole way. No complaints about the cold, no questions about where they were going, nothing. By the time the cabin came into view, Coulter's stomach was tight with something like dread. He'd stopped seeing the place clearly months ago, but now, looking at it through a stranger's eyes, the decay was obvious. Shutters hanging crooked, porch sagging, weeds grown up through what used to be Rachel's flower garden. He felt Lin Yue go very still behind him. "This is it," he said unnecessarily. He dismounted, helped her down. She stood in the yard holding her bag, looking at the cabin with an expression he couldn't read. Not quite horror, not quite resignation, something in between. "I know it's rough," he started. "Where do I sleep?" she asked. He'd forgotten about that entirely. The cabin had 2 rooms, the main living area and the bedroom where he slept when he bothered sleeping at all. There was technically a loft space above, but it was full of junk and probably mice. "There's a loft," he said. "Needs cleaning, but there's a bed up there. Was gonna be for, He stopped. "It's got a bed." She nodded. "I see it now?" He showed her inside, watching her face as she took in the disaster of the main room. Dishes stacked in the basin, some of them growing mold, floors thick with tracked-in dirt, the cold hearth full of old ashes. Rachel's sewing basket, his empty bottles lined up on the mantel like soldiers. Lin Yu set her bag down carefully, walked a slow circle through the room. She touched nothing, just looked. "You have cleaning supplies?" she asked finally. "Yeah, under the basin there." "Food in the house?" "Some. Not much. There's a smokehouse out back with some deer meat that's probably still good." She nodded, still taking inventory. "I start now. You have work to do outside?" It wasn't a question, really, more a polite way of telling him to get out of her way. "Yeah," he said. "I got work." He fled to the barn like a man escaping a burning building. The barn was in better shape than the house, mostly because the animals had needed him to keep it functional. He busied himself with tasks he'd been putting off, mucking stalls, checking tack, inventorying feed, anything to avoid going back inside and watching a stranger navigate the ruins of his life. Around midday, smoke started rising from the chimney. The smell of cooking food drifted across the yard, real food, not the charred meat and burnt beans he'd been subsisting on. His stomach growled so loud it startled him. He made himself finish his work before going inside. By the time he did, the sun was starting to sink and he was filthy with barn dirt and sweat. The cabin stopped him in his tracks. The floor was swept. The dishes were clean and stacked. The hearth was burning bright and hot, and there was actual food on the table, rice and vegetables and what looked like chicken cooked in some kind of sauce. The empty bottles were gone from the mantel. So was Rachel's sewing basket. Lin Yue was at the basin, washing her hands. She'd tied a cloth around her hair and rolled up her sleeves, and there was a set to her shoulders that said she'd been working hard. "I put basket in bedroom," she said without turning around. "Personal things should be private." He didn't know what to say to that, to any of this. "Food is ready," she continued. "You should eat." He stood there like an idiot, still holding his hat, trying to reconcile this clean, warm space with the tomb he'd been living in that morning. "I should wash up first," he managed. "Water's heating, basin is clean." She said it matter of fact, like transforming his entire living space in 6 hours was nothing remarkable. He washed at the basin, really washed, with soap she must have found somewhere. The water was warm. When was the last time he'd had warm water to wash with? They sat at the table across from each other. Lin Yu served the food in careful portions. The silence was heavy but not hostile. Just 2 people who didn't know each other, eating. The food was good. Better than good. He couldn't remember the last time he'd tasted anything that wasn't scorched or raw or so bland it might as well have been sawdust. "This is..." He stopped, started again. "You're a good cook." "Thank you." She kept her eyes on her plate. They finished the meal without further conversation. When they were done, she cleared the dishes efficiently, set them to soak. He sat at the table watching her move around the space, this stranger making herself at home in the shell of his life. "The loft," he said. "I can help you move things. Get it ready." "Is fine. I already prepare." She gestured upward. "Bed is made. Is warm enough." Of course she'd already done it. She'd done everything. "Right," he said. "Well, I usually turn in early. Sun's down, not much else to do." "I understand. I will clean kitchen, then sleep." He stood, felt awkward about it, sat back down. "There's rules we should we should talk about expectations, how this is going to work." She turned from the basin, gave him her full attention, waiting. Now that he had it, he didn't know what to say. What were the rules supposed to be? He'd never had an employee before. Never had anyone but Rachel living here, and that was different. Everything about this was different. "I'm up before dawn usually," he said. "Work till dark most days. You don't have to cook fancy. What you made tonight is more than... It's good. That's good. Just keep the place clean and food ready, and that's enough." "Okay. And don't..." He stopped, unsure how to say it. "Don't move Rachel's things. The basket, or her clothes in the bedroom, or anything that was hers. Just leave it." Something shifted in her expression. Not judgment, exactly. Understanding, maybe. "Okay," she said again, softer. "That's it, I guess. Any questions? How you want laundry done? How often you want bread baked? You have food restrictions." Practical questions, work questions. He could handle those. They spent another few minutes working out the domestic logistics, and then there was nothing left to discuss. Lin Yue finished the dishes. Coulter went to his bedroom and closed the door. He lay in bed listening to her move around in the loft above him. Quiet footsteps, the creak of the bed frame, then silence. Outside, wind moved through the pines with that sound like the ocean. An owl called somewhere down the mountain. For the first time in 3 years, the cabin didn't feel completely dead. He didn't know if that was better or worse. They fell into a rhythm over the following days, built on silence and space and careful avoidance of anything personal. Coulter rose before dawn, dressed in the dark, slipped out before Lin Yu woke. By the time he came in for breakfast, there would be food waiting, rice porridge or eggs or yesterday's bread toasted over the fire. She'd leave it covered on the table and disappear into some other task, giving him room to eat alone. He'd work outside all day, mending fences, checking on cattle, chopping wood, fixing all the things he'd let break. The work was endless. He'd let it pile up so long it felt impossible, but having someone else in the cabin somehow made it seem more urgent, like he had to prove he was still functional, still capable of maintaining something. Around midday, she'd bring food out to wherever he was working. She'd set it down nearby, not quite looking at him, and walk away before he could say thank you. Every time. Dinner was the only meal they shared, and even that was mostly silent. She'd cook, they'd eat, she'd clean up. Sometimes he'd try to make conversation, ask about her day, comment on the weather, mention something about the ranch. She'd answer in short, polite sentences that didn't invite follow-up. "Roof is leaking as a loft," she said one evening. "I'll patch it tomorrow." "Thank you." That was the extent of it, but the cabin continued to transform around them. She scrubbed years of neglect out of the floorboards, washed the windows until they were actually transparent, organized the chaos of his kitchen into something approaching functional, fixed the latch on the cupboard door he'd been meaning to repair for 6 months. Little things appeared that hadn't been there before. Wildflowers in a jar on the table, curtains on the windows, made from some fabric she must have found in a trunk somewhere. The smell of bread baking, which he'd forgotten was a smell that could exist in this place. He tried not to watch her work, but sometimes he'd catch himself staring. The way she moved was different from Rachel. Smaller, quicker, more efficient. Rachel used to hum while she cooked. Lin Yue was silent. Rachel would stop to look out the window at the view. Lin Yue never stopped moving. Different. Everything was different, and maybe that was better, easier. 2 weeks in, he came back from checking the north fence line to find her in the yard, struggling with the pump. It had been giving him trouble for a month. The handle stuck halfway down and you had to fight it. "Here," he said, moving toward her. "Let me." She stepped back quickly, like he'd startled her. He worked the pump until water came, filled the bucket she'd set out. "Thank you," she said, reaching for the bucket. It's heavy. I'll carry it. I can manage. But he picked it up anyway, carried it to the cabin, set it inside the door. When he turned around, she was standing in the doorway, backlit by the late afternoon sun. Her expression was unreadable. You don't have to do my work, she said. I know, but that pump's a bastard. Excuse my language. The corner of her mouth might have twitched. Might have. Yes, is difficult. I'll fix it proper this weekend. She nodded, and for a second they just stood there, looking at each other across the threshold. Then she stepped inside and the moment broke. But something had shifted. Some invisible line had been crossed. Permission granted for small kindnesses. After that, he started noticing things. The way she favored her left hand when carrying heavy pots like the right one hurt. The cough she tried to hide, turning away and covering her mouth. How thin she was under the oversized dress she wore every day. You got other clothes? He asked one evening. She looked up from her sewing, mending his shirts, which had more hole than fabric at this point. This is fine. It's going to be cold soon, really cold. You need warmer things. I am fine, Mr. Graves. Coulter, he said. You can call me Coulter. Mr. Graves makes me feel old. She considered this. Coulter, she said carefully, testing the name. You can call me Lynn. It was such a small thing. Just names. But something in his chest loosened slightly. The first real snow came in mid-October, earlier than usual. Coulter woke to silence, that specific muffled quiet that only came with heavy snowfall. When he looked out the window, the world had disappeared under white. Lynn was already up, stoking the fire. She glanced at the window, then at him. Is bad? She asked. It's early, but yeah, looks like a few inches already. By noon it was a foot. By evening it was still coming down, heavy and relentless. They were snowed in completely, the trail down the mountain erased. This was the part Coulter had been dreading. The isolation he'd chosen for himself was one thing, forcing it on someone else was different. He kept waiting for her to panic, to demand he take her back to town, to regret every decision that brought her here. But Lynn just went about her work, cooked meals, kept the fire going, organized the food stores with an eye toward rationing, like she'd done this before. On the third day of being snowed in, he found her staring out the window at the white expanse, hands still in the dishwater. You okay? He asked. She startled slightly, pulled her hands from the basin. Yes, just looking. It's a lot, I know, being stuck inside. In China, in winter, we stay inside for weeks sometimes. This is not strange to me. She paused. It's quiet, though. Too quiet? No, it is... She searched for the word. Peaceful. He didn't know what to say to that. Peaceful wasn't a word he'd have used for anything in the last 3 years. That night, with the storm still raging outside, they sat by the fire after dinner. Usually, she'd retreat to the loft once the kitchen was clean, giving him his space. But tonight, she sat in Rachel's chair, his chair now since Rachel was gone, doing needlework while he pretended to read a book he'd read 5 times already. The silence was different than usual, heavier. Like there were words trying to form, but neither of them knew how to say them. Where did you learn English? He asked finally. She didn't look up from her sewing. Missionary school, in Canton, before I come to America. How long you been here? 6 years. Came with my husband for railroad work. Her needle kept moving, steady. He died 2 years ago. Accident with blasting powder. I'm sorry. Is past. She tied off a thread, examined her work. Your wife. How did she die? The question should have felt invasive. Somehow it didn't. Fever, he said. Started as a cold, turned into something worse. By the time I got a doctor up here, nothing to be done. He stared into the fire. Took her 3 days. I sat right where you're sitting and watched her go. Lynn was quiet for a long moment. That is a hard way to lose someone. Yeah. You blame yourself. It wasn't a question. He looked at her sharply, but her expression was neutral. Just stating a fact. Should have got the doctor sooner, he said. Should have taken her down to town when it started. Should have... He stopped. A lot of shoulds. Yes. She went back to her sewing. Always many shoulds when someone dies. They sat in silence after that, but it was different now, less empty. 2 people who'd both lost everything, keeping each other company in a snowstorm. Outside, the wind howled and the snow kept falling. Inside, the fire burned warm. And for the first time since Rachel died, Coulter Graves didn't feel like he was drowning quite so badly. The snow stopped on the fourth day, leaving the world buried under 3 feet of white silence. Coulter dug a path from the cabin to the barn before sunrise, his breath coming in hard clouds that hung in the frozen air. His shoulders ached from the work, but it felt good. Clean. Like he was fighting something he could actually beat. Lynn had coffee waiting when he came back inside, stamping snow off his boots. She'd learned he liked it strong enough to strip paint, and she didn't comment on how much he drank or how early he started. Small mercies. "Animals okay?" she asked, setting a plate of fried eggs and toast in front of him. "Cold but fine. Gonna need to break ice on the water trough every few hours." She nodded, already thinking ahead. "I can do afternoon. You do morning and night." He looked up at her, surprised. "You don't have to do that. I have hands. I can break ice." She said it simply, like it was obvious. "You cannot do everything alone." Something in his chest shifted at that. You cannot do everything alone. He'd been trying to do exactly that for 3 years, and it had nearly killed him. "All right," he said. "Yeah, that'd help." She gave a small nod and went back to the stove. He watched her move around the kitchen. Efficient, economical, wasting no motion. Everything she did had purpose. No hesitation. Rachel used to dance when she cooked, spinning between the counter and the stove like it was a waltz. Lynn moved like a soldier on patrol. Different. Always different. After breakfast, he went back outside to check the fence lines. The snow was deep enough that he had to break trail for every step, and by midday, his legs were burning. He found 2 sections of fence down under the weight of snow and ice. The work of fixing them would take days. He was wrestling with a broken post when he heard footsteps crunching through the snow behind him. Lynn appeared carrying a tin cup and a cloth bundle. "It's past lunch," she said, handing him the cup. "You did not come back." The coffee was still hot. The bundle held bread and cheese and some kind of dried meat. He hadn't even realized he was hungry until the smell hit him. "Didn't mean to worry you," he said. "I'm not worried, just practical. You work better with food." But there was something in her voice that suggested maybe she'd been a little worried. She stood there while he ate, looking at the broken fence. "This happened often. Every winter, snow gets heavy, old wood gives up." He swallowed a mouthful of bread. "Should have replaced these posts 2 years ago." "Why did you not?" The question was direct, no judgment in it, just curiosity. "Didn't seem worth the effort, I guess." He stared at the broken wood. Nothing seemed worth much effort back then. Lynn was quiet for a moment, then she crouched down and started gathering the broken pieces into a pile. Her hands were red from the cold. She wasn't wearing gloves. "You don't have gloves," he said. "It's fine." "It's not fine. Your hands are going to freeze." He pulled off his own gloves, held them out. "Here." She looked at the gloves, then at him, something complicated crossing her face. "You need them." "I got big hands. Been working in cold my whole life. You take them." For a second, he thought she'd refuse again out of pure stubbornness. But then she took the gloves and pulled them on. They were huge on her, the fingers flopping empty at the ends, and something about the sight made him want to laugh for the first time in recent memory. "Look ridiculous," she said, examining her hands. "Yeah, but they're warm." She flexed her fingers experimentally, then went back to gathering wood. They worked together for the next hour in silence, him fixing the post and her clearing debris. When he finally got the fence stable again, the sun was starting to sink and the temperature was dropping fast. "Come on," he said, "before we both freeze solid out here." They walked back to the cabin together, following the trail he'd broken that morning. The snow had a crust on it now that crunched under their boots. Above them, the sky was going pink and orange, the kind of sunset you only got at altitude in winter. Lynn stopped walking and just looked at it. "Pretty, isn't it?" Coulter said. "Yes." Her voice was soft. "In China, we say sky like this means ancestors are painting, making world beautiful for the living." "That's a nice thought. It's just story. But nice story." She started walking again. Better than thinking is just light and air and nothing else. That night after dinner, she didn't retreat to the loft immediately. Instead, she brought down a basket he'd never seen before and sat by the fire sorting through fabric scraps. "What are you making?" he asked. "Quilt. Winter is long. Need more blankets." He watched her work for a while, the way she'd hold up two pieces of fabric together, considering if they matched. Her hands moved quick and sure with the needle, making tiny stitches that would hold for years. "Where'd you learn to sew like that?" "My mother. She was best seamstress in our village." Lynn tied off a thread. "She made wedding dresses for rich families, very expensive, very beautiful. I was supposed to learn, take over when she got old." "What happened?" "I came to America instead." She selected a new piece of fabric, dark blue with small white flowers. "She cried when I left, said I was throwing away good life for unknown thing." "You ever regret it?" Lynn considered the question seriously. "Sometimes. When husband died, many times I regret. But regret does not change anything. I am here. Mother is there. Cannot go back, so must go forward. Must go." Coulter knew that feeling intimately, the impossibility of going back, the weight of forward being the only option. "You got any other family?" he asked. "Brothers, sisters?" "One brother, younger. He stayed in China, married local girl, has children now." She smoothed the fabric on her lap. "I get letters sometimes, but they take many months. Last one said his son's starting school. That was year ago." "You miss them." "Yes. But missing is also just feeling. Cannot change what is true." She looked up at him, her expression matter of fact. "You miss your wife still." It wasn't a question, but he answered anyway. "Every day. That is normal. Love does not stop when person dies, just has nowhere to go." She went back to her sewing. "It's hard, having love with no place to put it." Nobody had ever said it quite like that before. Having love with no place to put it. That was exactly what it felt like, this constant pressure in his chest, all these feelings that used to go to Rachel just building up with nowhere to drain. "Yeah," he said quietly. "That's hard." They sat in silence after that, but it wasn't uncomfortable. Just two people existing in the same space, both carrying things they couldn't put down. The fire cracked and settled. Outside, a coyote called somewhere down the mountain, and another answered from further away. The sound used to make Coulter feel lonely, just a reminder of how isolated he was. But tonight, with Lynn sitting across from him stitching fabric together, it just sounded like the world doing what it always did. Over the next few weeks, winter settled in hard. The temperature dropped below zero most nights, and ice formed on the inside of the windows despite the fire. Coulter spent his days doing maintenance work, keeping the barn warm, making sure the animals had food and water, chopping enough wood to keep them from freezing. Lynn kept the cabin running like a small, efficient machine. She'd figured out how to make their food stores stretch, cooking meals that used every scrap. Nothing was wasted. Bones became broth. Stale bread became pudding. Vegetable scraps went to the chickens. She also started venturing outside more, despite the cold. He'd see her trudging through the snow to the chicken coop, or breaking ice at the water trough like she'd promised, or just standing in the yard looking at the mountains. One morning he found her trying to carry firewood from the pile behind the barn. The logs were too big for her. She could barely lift two at a time, and she kept having to stop and rest. "Let me get that," he said, coming up behind her. She jumped slightly, nearly dropping the wood. "I can do it." "I know you can, but I can do it faster." He took the logs from her arms. "You're going to hurt yourself trying to carry these." "I am not weak." "Didn't say you were. But you're small, and these logs are heavy. It's just physics." She crossed her arms, clearly irritated. "In China, I carry rice bags heavier than this." "In China, you probably weren't doing it in 3 feet of snow wearing 2 big boots." He started toward the cabin with the wood. "Come on, you can get the door." She followed him, still radiating annoyance. But she got the door. He stacked the wood by the hearth, then turned to face her. "Look, I'm not trying to say you can't do things. I'm just trying to make things easier, that okay?" Lynn studied him for a long moment, something shifting in her expression. "You are not like other men I know." "How's that?" "Other men, they tell me what to do because they think women are stupid. You tell me what to do because you are trying to help." She paused. "Is different reason better reason?" "Well, I don't think you're stupid. Anyone who can make a cabin this livable in a few weeks is pretty damn smart, if you ask me." Was that a smile? Just a flicker at the corner of her mouth, gone almost before it registered. Thank you, she said, for wood and for other things. You're welcome. She went back to her work and he went back to his, and the day moved forward like days did. But something had shifted again, another small wall coming down, another bit of distance closing. That night, a storm rolled in with a vengeance. The wind screamed around the cabin, shaking the walls and sending snow driving sideways past the windows. Coulter lay in bed listening to it, waiting for the sound of something breaking. The roof, maybe, or a window finally giving up. Around midnight, he heard footsteps on the stairs from the loft, then a soft knock on his bedroom door. Coulter? Lynn's voice was quiet but clear. He sat up, immediately alert. What's wrong? Roof is leaking. In loft. Water coming in. Shit. He pulled on his pants, grabbed his shirt. How bad? Not bad yet, but getting worse. He followed her up to the loft, carrying a lamp. Water was dripping steadily through a crack in the roof, pooling on the floor near her bed. She'd already moved her things to the dry corner and put a pot under the leak, but more water was coming in than the pot could handle. I can't fix it in this storm, he said, examining the damage. Wind would tear me right off the roof, but I can patch it from inside, keep the worst out until morning. He went back down for supplies, spare wood, tar paper, nails. Lynn watched as he worked, holding the lamp so he could see. The patch wasn't pretty, but it would hold. There, he said, climbing down from the stool he'd been standing on. Should keep you dry enough for tonight. Thank you. She looked at the wet floor, then at her bed in the corner. Everything was damp despite her efforts. You can't sleep up here tonight, Coulter said. Too cold and wet. Where else do I sleep? Good question. The cabin only had one bedroom, and his bed was barely big enough for him. There was the floor by the fire, but that seemed cruel after she'd been working so hard. Take my bed, he said. I'll sleep by the fire. No, is your bed. I take floor. Lynn, you are bigger. Need bed more than me. I'm fine on floor. They stood there arguing about it for another 5 minutes, both too stubborn to give ground, until finally Coulter threw up his hands in frustration. Fine. We're both being ridiculous. The bed's big enough for 2 people if we're not trying to do anything but sleep. You take one side, I'll take the other. We both get rest. Nobody freezes or drowns. That work? Lynn's eyes went wide. That is not proper. Proper went out the window when you moved to a cabin alone with a man you barely know. We're past proper. This is about survival. He rubbed his face, suddenly exhausted. Look, I'm not going to touch you. I'm just offering you half a bed so you don't have to sleep on wet floorboards in freezing temperature. You can say no if you want, but it's a stupid thing to say no to. She stared at him for a long moment, calculating. Then she grabbed her blanket from the damp bed and marched past him down the stairs. Fine, she said over her shoulder, but you stay on your side. Wasn't planning on doing anything else. They arranged themselves awkwardly in the bed, as far apart as physics would allow. Coulter faced the wall. Lynn faced the door. There was at least a foot of space between them. The wind continued to howl outside, rattling the shutters. Thank you, Lynn said quietly into the darkness. For fixing roof. For letting me sleep here. You're welcome. Silence settled. He could hear her breathing, feel the slight movement of the mattress when she shifted position. It was strange having another person in the bed. He hadn't shared it with anyone since Rachel died, and his body didn't quite know what to do with the proximity. But it was also, in some unexpected way, comforting. The cabin felt less empty. The darkness felt less complete. Coulter? Lynn's voice was barely a whisper. Yeah? Storm sounds very angry. Mountain storms are mean, but the cabin's solid. We'll be all right. Okay. A pause. Your wife, did she like storms? The question caught him off guard. Rachel, no, she hated them. Used to hide under the blankets and make me tell her stories until they passed. What kind of stories? Happy ones. Made-up things. Adventures where nothing bad happened. He stared at the dark wall. She liked endings where everyone was okay. Those are good stories, Lynn said. World needs more of those. Yeah. They fell quiet again. At some point, Coulter drifted off to the sound of wind and breathing and the knowledge that for the first time in 3 years, he wasn't completely alone in the dark. When he woke up, pale morning light was coming through the window and Lynn was already gone. He could hear her downstairs starting the fire, the clank of the kettle being filled. like nothing unusual had happened, like they hadn't spent the night in the same bed. Maybe that was better, easier. He got dressed and went downstairs. Lynn was at the stove, her hair already tied back, her face giving away nothing. "Morning," he said. "Morning. Coffee is almost ready. How's the loft?" "Still wet. We'll need full day to dry." "I'll fix the roof proper this morning. Storm's past." She nodded, poured coffee into 2 cups. They went through the morning routine like always: breakfast, work assignments, plans for the day. But there was something different in the air, some subtle shift in how they moved around each other. Coulter spent the morning on the roof, replacing the damaged section properly. It was cold work, his fingers going numb despite his gloves, but he was determined to do it right. Lynn shouldn't have to sleep in a leaking room. When he came down, she had lunch ready and the loft aired out as much as possible. "Fixed?" she asked. "Fixed. Should be dry up there in a few hours." "Good." She hesitated, then added, "Last night. Thank you for being gentlemen. I know it was a strange situation." "Not that strange, just practical." He met her eyes. "You needed a dry place to sleep." "I had one, simple as that." "Yes, simple." But the way she said it suggested maybe it wasn't quite that simple. The days continued to shorten as December came on. The sun barely cleared the mountain peaks before starting to sink again, and the darkness felt like it lasted forever. Coulter fell into a pattern of working hard during daylight hours and collapsing by the fire at night, too tired to think about much of anything. Lynn kept finding small ways to make the cabin more livable. She'd rearranged the kitchen to be more efficient, put up shelves. Coulter didn't know he had. Found an old rug in the barn and cleaned it until it was almost presentable. Little improvements that added up to something that almost felt like a home. One evening, he came inside to find her kneeling by the hearth, poking at something in the fire. "What are you doing?" "Trying to cook rice different way. But fire is wrong temperature." She sat back on her heels, frustrated. "Cannot get hot enough." "What do you need it to do?" She explained what she was trying to make. Some kind of rice cake from her childhood that needed very specific heat. Coulter listened, then went to the barn and came back with an old cast-iron box he'd forgotten he owned. "Try this," he said. "It's a Dutch oven. You can bury it in the coals. Gets hot as hell." Lynn's face lit up. Actual, genuine excitement. "This will work?" "Should. Rachel used to make bread in it." She took the Dutch oven carefully, examining it. "I can use this? You do not mind?" "It's just sitting in the barn collecting dust. Use it all you want." She smiled then, a real smile that transformed her whole face. He'd seen her pleased before, or satisfied, but never quite like this. Never this open. "Thank you, Coulter. This is very good." That night, the cabin filled with the smell of whatever she was making, something sweet and ricey that made his mouth water. When it was done, she cut him a piece. It was chewy and sweet and completely unlike anything he'd ever tasted. "This is good," he said around a mouthful. "It's called Neon Gao. We eat it for New Year celebration." She took a small piece for herself. "My mother made this every year. I have not had since coming to America." "Well, now you can make it whenever you want." "Yes." She looked down at the cake, something sad crossing her face. "But is not same without family to share it with." Coulter understood that. Food always tasted different when you were alone. "You got family now," he said before he could stop himself. "I mean, we're not... I just meant you're not alone here, if that counts for anything." Lynn looked at him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then she cut another piece of cake and put it on his plate. "Yes," she said quietly, "that counts for something." The next day, Coulter rode down to check on the cattle at the lower pasture. The snow was deep but manageable, and Bravo knew the trail well enough to navigate it. He found the herd clustered together for warmth near the tree line, all of them looking healthy enough. He was heading back when he saw smoke rising from the direction of town. Too much smoke. Wrong color. Fire. His first instinct was to ride toward it, see if they needed help, but that would mean being gone for hours, maybe overnight if it was bad. And Lynn was alone at the cabin. He sat on his horse in the snow, torn between obligations. The old Coulter would have gone without thinking. That was what neighbors did. You helped. But the old Coulter hadn't had anyone waiting for him at home. In the end, he turned Bravo toward the cabin. If the town needed him that badly, someone would ride up and ask. Until then, his responsibility was here. He got back just before dark to find Lynn in the yard, struggling to drag a fallen branch toward the woodpile. The thing was huge, must have come down in last night's wind. "What are you doing?" he called out, dismounting. "Need wood," she said, breathing hard from the effort. "That branch is bigger than you are." He took it from her, dragged it easily to the chopping block. "You should have waited for me. You were gone long time. I did not know when you come back." "I'm back now." He grabbed the axe. "Go inside before you freeze." But she didn't go inside. She stood there watching as he split the branch into manageable pieces, her arms crossed against the cold. "You saw a fire?" she asked. "From town?" "Yeah." "Is bad?" "Don't know. Probably. But someone would have come got me if they needed help that bad." Lynn nodded slowly. "You chose to come back here, instead of going to help." It wasn't a question. He paused mid-swing, then brought the axe down hard. "Yeah, I did." "Why?" He split another log before answering. "Because you're here alone. Because I told you I'd be back before dark. Because—" He stopped, searching for words. Because it mattered more. Coming back. She didn't say anything for a long moment. Then, quietly, "I'm glad you came back." Something in his chest tightened. He looked at her standing there in the fading light, this small woman who'd somehow become the center of his world without him noticing when it happened. "Yeah," he said. "Me too." That night, they sat by the fire longer than usual. Lynn was working on her quilt, and Coulter was attempting to fix a harness that had cracked. Neither of them was particularly successful. The quilt wasn't coming together right, and the harness was being stubborn. "This is impossible," Lynn muttered, pulling out stitches for the third time. "What's wrong with it?" "Pattern is wrong. Cannot make it match." She held up the fabric, showing him how the pieces didn't quite align. Coulter looked at it. He didn't know anything about quilting, but he could see the problem. "You need to cut that piece smaller, see? If it was about an inch less, it'd fit." Lynn examined it, then looked at him with surprise. "You are right. How did you know?" "Used to help Rachel sometimes. Learned a bit about how fabric works." He went back to his harness. "Not much, but enough to see when something doesn't fit." She made the adjustment, and this time the pieces went together smoothly. "Thank you." "You're welcome." They worked in comfortable silence for a while. Outside, the wind had picked up again, but it wasn't the violent storm wind, just the constant mountain wind that never really stopped. "Coulter?" Lynn's voice was tentative. "Yeah?" "Why did you hire me?" "Really?" He looked up from the harness. "What do you mean?" "Other people in town, they did not want to hire me. Too Chinese, too foreign, too different." She kept her eyes on her sewing. "But you did not care about that." "Why?" He thought about it. The real answer was complicated. Desperation, loneliness, the realization that he was dying slowly and needed something to change. But there was more to it than that. "You were the only one who didn't look at me like I was already dead," he said finally. "Everyone else in that town, they see me and they see a ghost. Someone who should have moved on but didn't. But you just saw a man who needed help with his ranch." He paused. "Felt like maybe if you could see me as still alive, maybe I could figure out how to be alive again." Lynn's hands had stopped moving. She looked at him directly, her dark eyes reflecting the firelight. "You are alive," she said. "You are here. You are working. You are living. That is being alive." "Doesn't always feel like it." "No. Sometimes does not feel like it." She set down her sewing. "After my husband died, I wake up every day and think, why am I still here? What is point? Everything I came to America for is gone. Should just give up." "What kept you going? Stubbornness, maybe? Or fear? Or just habit of waking up?" She smiled slightly. "Maybe all three, but mostly stubbornness." Coulter found himself smiling back. "Yeah, stubbornness is a good reason. Is only reason sometimes." They stayed up late that night, talking about things they'd never talked about before. Their childhoods, their marriages, the moments when they'd chosen one path over another, and how those choices had led them here, to this cabin, to this night. And when they finally went to their separate beds, Coulter lay awake thinking about how strange it was that the thing he'd been most afraid of, letting someone into his life again, had become the thing keeping him tethered to the world. Outside, the December wind sang through the pines. Inside, the fire burned low, and somewhere between the darkness and the dawn, Coulter Graves started to understand that maybe, just maybe, he was learning how to be alive again. If you or someone you know is having a difficult time, free support is available. Find resources. December hit the mountain like a fist. The temperature dropped so low the sap in the pine trees froze and cracked with sounds like rifle shots in the night. Coulter woke one morning to find frost coating the inside of the bedroom window in patterns like ferns, beautiful and deadly. He could see his breath in the room, despite the fire Lynn had already started downstairs. When he came down, she was at the stove wrapped in 2 shawls, her hands shaking slightly as she poured coffee. "You're freezing," he said. "It's fine, just cold." "It's not fine, you're shivering." He looked at her thin dress, the same one she wore every day. "You need warmer clothes. I should have taken care of this weeks ago." "I have shawls." "Shawls aren't enough." He went to the bedroom and came back with an armload of Rachel's winter clothes. Thick wool skirts, flannel shirts, a heavy coat. He set them on the table. "These should fit you better than what you got." Lynn stared at the clothes like they might bite her. "These are your wife's things." "Yeah, and she's not here to wear them, and you're freezing." He pushed the pile toward her. "Take them, please." "You said not to touch her things." "I said don't move them. This is different. This is you not dying of cold in my cabin because I'm too stubborn to let you use clothes that are just sitting in a trunk." He met her eyes. Rachel wouldn't want them going to waste. She'd want someone to use them. Lynn reached out slowly, touched the fabric of the coat. Good wool, well made. "You are sure?" "I'm sure." She gathered the clothes carefully, held them against her chest. "Thank you, Coulter. This is very kind. It's practical. Can't have my cook freezing to death." But they both knew it was more than practical. It was trust. Permission. Another wall coming down. That afternoon, Lynn came downstairs wearing one of Rachel's wool skirts and a thick flannel shirt. The clothes fit her better than her old dress, and she moved easier without the constant shivering. Coulter tried not to stare. Tried not to see Rachel's clothes on someone else's body. Tried not to feel the complicated mix of relief and grief and something else he couldn't name. "Better?" he asked. "Much better. Very warm." She smoothed the skirt self-consciously. "Is okay? Does not bother you?" "It's fine. You look—" He stopped. "You look warm. That's what matters." The lie sat between them for a moment. She didn't look fine. She looked good. Really good. And that bothered him more than seeing Rachel's clothes on her did. He fled to the barn. The next week passed in a blur of work and weather. A blizzard came through that lasted 3 days, trapping them inside again. Then it cleared just long enough for Coulter to dig out and check on the animals before another storm rolled in. The snow kept piling up until it was level with the bottom of the windows, and the world shrank down to just the cabin and the small circle of space they could carve out around it. Lynn handled it better than he expected. She'd settled into the isolation like she'd been born to it, finding endless tasks to occupy her time. She reorganized every cupboard in the cabin, mended every piece of clothing they owned, and started teaching herself to carve wood with one of his old knives. "What are you making?" Coulter asked one evening, watching her work. "Do not know yet. Just practicing." She held up a piece of pine she'd been whittling. "In China, old men do this in park. Always look peaceful. Thought maybe I try." "You any good at it?" "No, is terrible." She showed him the uneven cuts, the way the wood had splintered in places. "But it's something to do with hands." He understood that. Needing to keep your hands busy so your mind didn't wander into dangerous territory. "Here," he said, taking the knife and wood. "You're cutting against the grain. That's why it's splitting. Go with it, like this." He demonstrated, the knife following the natural lines of the wood. A curl of pine peeled away clean and smooth. Lynn watched intently, then took the knife back and tried it herself. This time, it worked better. "See? You got it. You are a good teacher. Just know about wood. Grew up doing carpentry with my dad before he died." "How old were you when he died?" 15. Logging accident. Tree fell wrong, crushed him before anyone could do anything. The memory was old enough it didn't cut as sharp anymore, just a dull ache. That's when I came out west. Couldn't stay in that town anymore. Everything reminded me of him. Lynn nodded slowly. Running from grief. I understand this. That what you did? Came to America to run? Maybe. Or maybe came to find something new. Hard to say which. She went back to her carving. When you are young, running and seeking feel same. Only later you realize difference. They sat in silence for a while, both working with their hands. The fire crackled, and outside the wind built into something that sounded angry. Around midnight, the storm hit full force. The cabin shook with each gust, and Coulter could hear things banging around outside. Loose shutters, maybe, or tools he'd forgotten to secure. He lay in bed listening, waiting for the sound of something breaking. Then he heard Lynn's door open and her footsteps in the hall. Coulter? Her voice was tight. He was up immediately. What's wrong? Something hit the roof, very loud noise, then cracking sound. He grabbed his coat and boots. Stay inside. Where are you going? To check the damage before the whole roof caves in. It's too dangerous. More dangerous to leave it. He was already heading for the door. Lynn caught his arm. Then I come with you. You need someone hold lamp. Lynn, do not argue. Is waste of time. She was right. He was wasting time. Fine, but you do exactly what I say. Understand? Yes. They went out into the storm together, the wind hitting them like a living thing that wanted them dead. Lynn held the lamp while Coulter fought his way to the barn for a ladder. Snow was coming down so thick he could barely see 3 feet ahead. Getting the ladder to the cabin and propped against the wall took both of them. The wind kept trying to tear it away, and twice Coulter nearly lost his grip. But finally, it was stable enough for him to climb. The damage was worse than he'd feared. A large branch had come down on the roof, punching a hole clean through the shingles. Snow was already piling up inside the attic space. How bad? Lynn shouted up at him over the wind. Bad. I need canvas and rope. She disappeared and came back with both. He'd never asked her where she found things in the barn. She just seemed to know where everything was at this point. Working in the storm was a nightmare. His hands went numb within minutes, and the wind kept trying to throw him off the ladder. But he managed to get the canvas over the hole and tied down enough to keep the worst of the weather out. By the time he climbed down, he was shaking from cold and exhaustion. Lynn grabbed his arm to steady him. Inside, now. She practically dragged him back to the cabin. Once inside, she sat him by the fire and started pulling off his frozen coat and gloves. His fingers were white and wouldn't bend properly. This is bad, she said, examining his hands. Could be frostbite. I've had worse. Do not be stupid. She went to heat water, came back with a basin of lukewarm water. Put hands in. Slow? Will hurt. She wasn't lying. As his hands warmed, the pain started, needle sharp and burning. He gritted his teeth against it. Lynn knelt beside him, watching his face. Breathe. Is just blood coming back. I know what it is. Then stop acting like tough cowboy and just breathe. Despite the pain, he almost smiled. Yes, ma'am. She stayed with him while feeling came back to his hands, adding warmer water gradually. At some point, she started rubbing his fingers gently, working the blood back into them. Her touch was careful and sure, and Coulter found himself watching her face in the firelight, the concentration in her eyes, the way she bit her lip when she was focused. Lynn, he said quietly. She looked up. Their faces were close, closer than he'd realized. He could see the individual snowflakes melting in her hair, the way the firelight made her eyes shine. Thank you, he said, for helping out there. For this. You would do same for me. Yeah, I would. Something passed between them in that moment. Recognition, maybe? Or possibility. He couldn't name it, but he felt it settle in his chest like warmth spreading. Lynn pulled back first, standing up and putting distance between them. Hands will be okay. Keep them warm tonight. Tomorrow we fix roof properly. Tomorrow, he agreed. But that night, lying in bed with his hands still tingling, Coulter couldn't stop thinking about the way she'd looked at him. Couldn't stop feeling where her fingers had touched his. Couldn't stop wondering what it meant that he wanted her to touch him again. The storm blew itself out by morning, leaving the world buried under another foot of snow. True to her word, Lynn helped him repair the roof properly, holding the ladder, passing up tools, clearing debris. They worked together with the efficiency of people who'd been doing this for years, not months. That night, Coulter's hands started to ache again, deep, bone-level pain from the frostbite. He tried to hide it, but Lynn noticed him flexing his fingers at dinner. Still hurting? Little bit. She disappeared upstairs and came back with a small tin. Give me your hands. What's that? Medicine. My mother made. Good for pain and swelling. She opened the tin, revealing a pungent salve. Will smell bad, but works. She was right about the smell. It was like camphor and herbs and something else he couldn't identify. But when she rubbed it into his hands, the relief was immediate. That's amazing, he said. What's in it? Many things. His secret recipe. She worked the salve into his palms, his fingers, between the joints. Her touch was gentle but firm, and Coulter tried very hard not to think about how good it felt. Your mother taught you to make this? Yes, she was healer in our village. People come to her for medicine, for advice, for help with everything. Lynn's voice was soft with memory. I miss her very much sometimes. I bet she misses you too. Oh, maybe. Or maybe she is angry I left. Chinese mothers, they do not always forgive easily. My mother was the same way, stayed angry at me for 3 years after I left to come west. He watched her work. But she forgave me eventually. Mothers usually do. I hope you're right. She finished with his hands and started to pull away, but Coulter caught her wrist gently. Lynn. She froze, looking at where he was touching her. I know this is... He stopped, trying to find the right words. I know I'm not easy to live with. And I know I don't say it enough, but having you here, it's... He stopped again, frustrated. You saved my life, you know that, right? I was dying up here before you came. Slowly, but dying. And you stopped that. Lynn's eyes were wide, her breathing shallow. I just cook and clean. It's just work. It's not just work. It's... He let go of her wrist, suddenly aware of how inappropriate this was. Never mind. I'm not saying it right. No. Her voice was barely a whisper. You are saying it right. I just do not know what to say back. You don't have to say anything. But she stayed there, kneeling beside his chair, close enough that he could feel the warmth of her, close enough that he could see the pulse beating in her throat, close enough that if he leaned forward just a little... She stood up abruptly. I should clean kitchen. Right, yeah, I'll just... He gestured vaguely at nothing. Lynn fled to the kitchen, and Coulter stayed in his chair feeling like he'd just stepped off a cliff and was still waiting to hit the ground. The next few days were awkward. They moved around each other carefully, maintaining distance, avoiding eye contact. The easy companionship they'd built over months felt suddenly fragile, like something that might shatter if they acknowledged it directly. Coulter threw himself into work, taking on projects that didn't need doing just to stay outside and away from the cabin, away from her, away from feelings he wasn't ready to examine. But the mountain had other plans. On the 3rd day of his self-imposed exile to the barn, he was splitting wood when his axe slipped. It happened fast. 1 second he had control, the next the blade was biting deep into his leg just above the boot. The pain was immediate and stunning. He dropped the axe and grabbed his leg, felt hot blood welling between his fingers. Shit. He tried to stand and his leg buckled under him. He was too far from the cabin for Lynn to hear him yell, and the blood was coming fast. Too fast. He managed to get his belt off and cinch it around his thigh above the wound, pulled it tight with shaking hands. Then he started crawling toward the cabin. It was maybe 50 yards, but it felt like miles. Every movement sent pain shooting up his leg, and blood kept seeping through the belt despite how tight he'd pulled it. Black spots danced in his vision. He made it to the porch steps before his arms gave out. Lynn! He tried to shout, but it came out as a rasp. Lynn! Nothing. She was inside, probably couldn't hear him over the wind. He pulled himself up 1 step, then another. His leg was leaving a trail of red in the snow. The world was getting fuzzy at the edges. The cabin door seemed impossibly far away. He reached for the next step and his hand slipped. His vision went gray. Then the door was opening and Lynn was there, her face going white when she saw him. Coulter! She was beside him in an instant, hands on his face. What happened? Axe. Slipped. He tried to gesture toward the barn, but his arm wouldn't cooperate. Bleeding bad. Inside. Can you stand? Don't know. She got under his arm somehow, this small woman supporting most of his weight, and half carried, half dragged him inside. The trip from the porch to the hearth was a blur of pain and Lynn's voice telling him to stay awake, to keep breathing, to not you dare die on me now. She got him on the floor by the fire and immediately started working on his leg. He felt her cutting away his pants, felt the belt come loose, felt the wash of blood that followed. "Is deep," she said, her voice tight. "Very deep. I need to stop bleeding." She disappeared and came back with armfuls of cloth, a bottle of whiskey, a needle, and thread. Her hands moved quick and sure, pressing cloth against the wound, applying pressure that made him gasp. "Drink," she ordered, pushing the whiskey bottle into his hand. "All of it will help with pain." He drank. The whiskey burned going down, but he kept drinking until she took the bottle away. "This will hurt," she said, and before he could ask what she meant, she was pouring whiskey directly into the wound. The pain was white-hot and complete. He heard someone screaming and realized dimly it was him. Lynn's hand clamped over his mouth. "Shh. Is okay. Is okay. I need to clean it or we'll get infected." She worked fast, cleaning the wound thoroughly while Coulter bit down on his own hand to keep from screaming again. Then she was stitching, her needle moving in and out of his flesh with practiced precision. "Where did you—" He gasped as the needle bit. "Where did you learn this?" "Mother was healer, remember? I helped her many times, stitch up farmers, railroad workers, all kinds of wounds." Her face was set in concentration. "This is bad cut, but I've seen worse. You will be okay." "You sure?" "No, but it's better if you believe me, so I lie." She tied off a stitch. "Almost done, just breathe." He tried to focus on breathing, on the ceiling, on anything but the needle going through his skin. At some point, his vision started to narrow, and he felt Lynn's hand on his face again. "Stay awake. Stay with me." Her voice was fierce. "You do not get to leave. You hear me? You do not leave." "Not planning on it," he managed. "Good." She finished the stitches, 12 of them, neat and even. Then she wrapped the wound tightly with clean cloth and sat back, her hands covered in his blood. "Done," she said. "You need to rest now, not move leg for at least few days." "Can't rest. Got work. Work can wait. You are not dying for some fence or some stupid wood." She stood up, wiped her hands on a rag. "I will bring your bed down here. You sleep by fire where I can watch you." "Lynn, you don't have to—" "Yes, I do have to." She looked at him with something like anger in her eyes. "You stupid man! You stupid, careless man! Could have died out there." "I'm sorry. Sorry does not fix this." But her voice cracked on the words. "You cannot die. I will not allow it." She turned away before he could respond, but not before he saw the tears on her face. Over the next hour, she transformed the area by the hearth into a sick room. She brought down his mattress and blankets, set up a small table within reach with water and food, arranged everything so he could get what he needed without standing. Then she sat beside him and didn't move for the rest of the night. "You should sleep," Coulter said at some point. "You've been up for hours." "I sleep when I know you are not going to die in your sleep." "I'm not going to die. You do not know that. Infection can come fast." She checked the bandage for what must have been the 10th time. "I need to watch for fever." "Lynn, please." Her voice was very small. "Please, just let me watch. I cannot—" She stopped. "I cannot lose anyone else. Not yet." His chest tightened at that, the raw fear in her voice, the way her hand shook slightly as she adjusted his blanket. "Okay," he said softly. "You can watch." She nodded and settled into Rachel's old chair, pulling her shawl tight around her shoulders. Coulter drifted in and out of sleep, and every time he woke up, she was there. Sometimes she was sewing, sometimes reading from one of his books, sometimes just staring into the fire, but always there. At some point in the deep night, he woke to find her asleep in the chair, her head tilted at an angle that was going to hurt in the morning. He watched her sleep for a while, the way her face relaxed, the small rise and fall of her breathing, how young she looked without the weight of worry pulling at her expression. And something shifted in him, some final piece falling into place. He was in love with her. The realization should have terrified him, should have felt like a betrayal of Rachel, should have been complicated and wrong and impossible. But lying there in the firelight, watching this woman who'd stitched him back together with the same fierce determination she brought to everything, it just felt true. Simple and true, and maybe inevitable. He didn't know what to do with it. Didn't know if she felt anything similar, or if he was just a job to her. Didn't know if he even deserved to feel this way after Rachel, but the feeling was there, undeniable as the pain in his leg. Lynn stirred, her eyes opening slowly. When she saw him awake, she sat up straight. "How do you feel?" "Like I got hit by a tree, but alive." She stood and checked the bandage again, her fingers gentle against his skin. "No fresh bleeding is good sign." "Lynn," he said. She looked at him. "Thank you. For saving me, for staying." He paused. "For everything." Something flickered in her expression. Surprise, maybe, or recognition. "You would do same for me." "Yeah, I would." He caught her hand before she could pull away. "But I need you to know it means something. You mean something. To me." Her eyes went wide. "Coulter, you don't have to say anything back. I just needed to say it. Needed you to know." She stared at him for a long moment, her hand still in his. Then, slowly, carefully, she brought his hand to her cheek and held it there. "I know," she whispered. "I know." And that was enough. For now, that was enough. Outside, the December wind sang through the frozen pines. Inside, the fire burned warm, and two people who'd learned what it meant to survive alone started learning what it might mean to survive together. The wound in Coulter's leg would heal, the scars would remain. But maybe that was all right. Maybe scars were just proof that you'd survived something that tried to kill you. Maybe they were proof that you were still alive. For 3 days, Coulter couldn't walk without help. His leg throbbed with a deep, constant ache that spiked into white-hot pain every time he moved wrong. Lynn changed his bandages twice a day, checking for infection with the same fierce attention she brought to everything else. "Still clean," she'd say each time, her fingers gentle on the wound. "You are lucky." "Lucky I didn't bleed out in the snow, you mean?" "Yes, that too." She kept him by the fire, feeding him soup and tea and whatever else she decided he needed. When he complained about being useless, she'd give him tasks he could do sitting down, mending harnesses, sharpening knives, sorting through seeds for spring planting that felt impossibly far away. But mostly, they talked. With nothing else to do and nowhere to escape to, they filled the hours with words. She told him about growing up in a small village outside Canton, about her father who'd been a farmer and her mother who'd healed half the countryside, about the moment she'd decided to leave everything she knew for a country she'd only heard about in stories. It was terrifying, she said one afternoon, sitting cross-legged on the floor beside his mattress while she worked on her quilt. "Everyone said I was crazy. Chinese girl alone on ship for weeks, then alone in America where no one speaks your language, where everyone looks at you like you are animal in zoo. Why'd you do it then?" She was quiet for a moment, considering. "Because staying felt like dying. Slow dying, maybe comfortable dying, but still dying. And I thought, if I am going to die anyway, better to die doing something that matters." Coming to America mattered? Finding out if I could. That mattered. She threaded her needle with practiced ease. My husband, he had dreamed of making fortune here, building railroads, sending money back to family, becoming an important man. I did not care about fortune. I just wanted to know what else was possible. "And? What'd you find out?" "That everything is possible and nothing is possible. That America is both better and worse than stories say. That being brave does not make things easy, just makes things different kind of hard." She looked up at him. "What about you? Why you come west?" He told her about his father dying, but not the rest of it. Not the real reason he'd left. "There was a girl," he said finally, "back in Pennsylvania, Sarah. We were going to get married, had it all planned out. Then my dad died, and suddenly I didn't have any money, didn't have anything to offer her. Her family made it clear I wasn't good enough anymore." She agreed with them? She said she loved me, but had to be practical. That love didn't pay bills. The old bitterness rose up, then settled again. Years had worn the edges off. So I left. Figured I'd make something of myself out here, prove them all wrong. "Did you?" "Made a ranch, met Rachel, built a life." He gestured at his wounded leg. "Then lost most of it. So I don't know." Maybe they were right after all. Lynn set down her sewing and looked at him directly. They were not right. You are a good man who had bad things happen. That is not same as being not good enough. How do you figure? Because good enough is not about money or success. It's about trying, about getting up when you fall down, about, she gestured at the cabin around them, about this. You could have given up completely, could have drunk yourself to death or put gun in mouth or just stopped caring until winter killed you. But you did not. You hired me. You kept going. That is being good enough. Something in his throat tightened. I don't feel like I kept going. Feel like I was drowning and you threw me a rope. Then you were smart enough to grab rope. That counts. She went back to her sewing. Besides, person who saves you is not judging if you are good enough. Person who saves you just wants you to live. They sat in silence after that, but it was comfortable. Easy. Like they'd known each other for years instead of months. On the fourth day, Coulter insisted on trying to walk. Lynn protested, but he was going crazy lying around doing nothing. Just to the porch and back, he said. I need to move. It's too soon, we'll open stitches. Then you can stitch me up again. Come on, help me up. She grumbled in what he was pretty sure was Chinese, but she helped him stand. The first step sent pain shooting up his leg, and he grabbed her shoulder for balance. See? Too soon, she said. Just give me a second. He took another step, then another. His leg screamed but held. Lynn stayed close, ready to catch him if he fell. They made it to the door before his legs started shaking too badly to continue. Enough, Lynn said firmly. Back to bed. Porch and back, I said. You said many stupid things. Does not mean I let you do them. But he could see the corner of her mouth twitching, almost a smile. Getting back to the mattress was harder than getting to the door. By the time he lowered himself down, he was sweating and his hands were shaking. Happy now? Lynn asked, checking his bandage. Getting there? Impossible, man. But she said it softly, with something that might have been affection. That night she cooked rice and vegetables with some of the smoked venison from the barn. The cabin filled with the smell of ginger and garlic and something else he couldn't name. When she served it, the food was rich and warming, nothing like his usual charred meat and beans. This is really good, he said, around a mouthful. Is my mother's recipe. Comfort food for winter. She picked at her own plate. I have not made it since coming to America. Did not have right ingredients before. Where'd you get them now? I traded with Mrs. Henderson in town, before first snow. Gave her some sewing work. She gave me spices from her store. You've been planning this? I plan many things. You just do not notice. She took a small bite. I think about what we will need for long winter. What will keep us healthy? What will make life less terrible? Life's not terrible. She raised an eyebrow. You almost died 4 days ago from cutting your own leg open. Okay, life's been better. But it's not terrible. High praise. They ate in silence for a bit. Outside, the wind was picking up again. Another storm coming, probably. They came every few days now, regular as clockwork. Lynn, Coulter said, setting down his bowl. What I said the other night. About you meaning something to me. She went very still. Yes? I meant it. I know the timing's bad and I'm in no shape to... He stopped, frustrated. I'm not good at this. Words and feelings and all that, but I need you to know it wasn't just the blood loss talking. I did not think it was. And I don't know what you want, or what you're looking for, or if you even... He ran a hand through his hair. I'm making a mess of this. Lynn set her own bowl aside and moved closer. Not touching, but close enough that he could see the small scar on her chin, the way her eyes caught the firelight. What are you trying to say, Coulter? That I care about you. That having you here is the best thing that's happened to me in 3 years. That I think about you all the time and I don't know what that means, but I know it means something. He met her eyes. And I need to know if that's just me or if you feel anything like that too. She looked at him for a long moment. Then quietly, I feel many things. Fear mostly. That I am making a mistake. That you still love your wife and I am just convenient. That I will care too much and you will decide you do not want Chinese widow living in your house. That's not... Let me finish. Her voice was firm. But also I feel hope. And happiness when you come inside from working. And worry when you are hurt. And something else I do not have English word for. Something that makes my chest feel tight when you look at me certain way. What way? The way you're looking at me right now. They were close enough now that Coulter could feel the warmth of her, smell the ginger and soap scent of her skin. His heart was pounding so hard he was sure she could hear it. Can I kiss you? He asked. She nodded, just barely. He leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away. But she didn't pull away. She stayed exactly where she was, and when his lips touched hers, it was soft and tentative, and nothing like kissing Rachel had been. Different. Everything was different. The kiss lasted maybe 5 seconds before they both pulled back, breathing a little harder. Was that okay? Coulter asked. Yes. I think yes. Lynn touched her fingers to her lips, looking slightly dazed. Can we try again, to be sure? He almost laughed. Yeah, we can try again. The second kiss was longer, deeper, less tentative. Lynn's hand came up to his jaw, and Coulter felt something in his chest crack open. 3 years of lockdown feeling suddenly finding an outlet. When they finally broke apart, she rested her forehead against his. I am scared, she whispered. Me too. What if we ruin this? What we have now is good. What if trying for more ruins it? Then we'll deal with it. But Lynn, he pulled back enough to look at her. I spent 3 years being too scared to feel anything. I don't want to do that anymore. I'd rather try and fail than not try at all. She studied his face, her thumb brushing along his jawline. Okay, we try. But slow, yes? I need slow. Slow is good. I can do slow. Good. She stood up, started gathering the dinner dishes. Now, you rest. Leg needs to heal. Yes, ma'am. But when she passed by his mattress, he caught her hand and pulled her down for one more quick kiss. She made a small sound of surprise, then laughed. Actual genuine laughter that lit up her whole face. Impossible man, she said again. You keep saying that, because keeps being true. Over the next week, Coulter's leg healed enough that he could walk without leaning on Lynn, though it still hurt like hell. She made him rest more than he wanted to, but he was learning that arguing with her was pointless. When Lynn decided something was happening, it happened. The cabin felt different now. Smaller somehow, but in a good way. Like the space between them had compressed into something intimate and warm. They found excuses to be near each other, her hand on his shoulder when she passed, his fingers brushing hers when she handed him coffee. Small touches that said more than words could. But they kept it slow, like she'd asked. Nothing beyond kissing, and even that was careful. Testing the waters. Making sure this was real, and not just isolation making them desperate. One afternoon, Coulter was sitting at the table trying to fix a broken hinge when Lynn came over and sat beside him. I need to tell you something, she said. The serious tone made him look up. What's wrong? Nothing wrong, just... She took a breath. My husband. When he died, I was relieved. Coulter blinked. Relieved? Not that he was dead, but that marriage was over. She wouldn't look at him, just stared at her hands. He was not bad man. Did not hit me, did not hurt me on purpose. But he was angry man, angry at America for not being what he expected, angry at me for not giving him sons, angry at world for being hard. Lynn, I need to say this, please. She swallowed. Living with angry man is like living with storm. You never know when it will hit, so you're always ready, always watching, always careful. And when he died, I felt terrible for being relieved. What kind of wife is relieved when husband dies? The kind who is drowning, Coulter said quietly. The kind who needed air. She nodded, blinking back tears. I tell you this because I need you to know I cannot live with another angry man. You have right to be angry about your wife, about your life, about everything. But if that anger becomes who you are, I will leave. I will not live through that again. The words hit him hard. He thought about the 3 years before she came. The drinking, the rage, the way he'd let everything fall apart, how easily he could have become exactly what she was describing. I understand, he said, and I can't promise I won't get angry sometimes, but I can promise I won't take it out on you. I won't make you live in a storm. You promise? I promise. She leaned against his shoulder, and he put his arm around her. They sat like that for a long time, watching snow fall past the window. Thank you for telling me, he said eventually. Had to. Before this goes further, you need to know all the broken parts. We're all broken somewhere. Yes. but some breaks are worse than others. Christmas came and went without much fanfare. They had no way to get to town for supplies, and Coulter had never been much for celebrating anyway. But on Christmas morning, Lynn presented him with a gift, a new shirt she'd sewn from fabric she must have been hiding for weeks. "You made this?" He held it up. The stitching was perfect. The fit would be right. "Your other shirts are full of holes. Needed new one." She said it casually, but he could see the nervousness in her eyes, hoping he'd like it. "It's perfect. Thank you." He wished he had something for her, but he'd been too focused on not dying to think about gifts. She must have seen it on his face. "Is okay. You do not need to give me anything." "I want to, though. Hold on." He went to the bedroom and came back with a small wooden box he'd been keeping in the back of Rachel's trunk. Inside was a silver brooch in the shape of a bird, something his mother had given Rachel, who'd barely worn it. "It's not much," he said, holding it out, "but I want you to have it." Lynn took the brooch carefully, turning it in the light. "It's beautiful. But this was your wife's." "Yeah, and now it's yours if you want it." She pinned it to her dress, right at the collar. The silver caught the firelight. "I want it. Thank you." They spent Christmas Day like any other, him doing light work around the cabin, her cooking and cleaning and working on her endless projects. But that night, they sat together on his mattress by the fire, her head on his shoulder, and it felt like the best Christmas he'd had in years. "Tell me about Good Christmas," Lynn said, "before wife died. What was it like?" Coulter thought back. Rachel would make this special bread that took all day. She'd decorate with pine branches and berries. We'd read together by the fire. Nothing fancy, but it was nice. Sounds very nice. "What about you? You celebrate Christmas in China?" "No. Different holidays, but we had Winter Festival. Everyone would make special food, visit family, stay up late telling stories." She smiled at the memory. "My mother would make dumplings until her hands cramped. She said Winter Festival food had to be made with tired hands, or it did not taste right." "That's a good tradition." "Yes. I miss it." She was quiet for a moment. "But this is good too, this quiet Christmas with you." "Yeah? Yes." She lifted her head to look at him. "Is different than what I imagined my life would be. But maybe different is okay." He kissed her forehead. "Different is better than okay." They stayed up late that night, feeding the fire and talking until words ran out. And when Lynn finally climbed the stairs to the loft, Coulter lay in the dark thinking about how strange life was. How loss and loneliness could somehow circle back around to something like joy if you just held on long enough. January arrived with the coldest temperatures yet. The water in the basin froze solid overnight, and ice formed on the inside of the door. Coulter's leg was healing well enough that he could do most of his normal work, though it still ached in the cold. He was out checking the animals one morning when he heard Lynn calling from the cabin. Not scared exactly, but urgent. He hurried back to find her standing in the yard, pointing at something in the snow. "What is it?" "Look." She gestured at the ground near the garden plot. "Something growing." He crouched down. She was right. A tiny green shoot was pushing up through the melting snow. Just one, but definitely alive. "That's impossible," he said. "Nothing grows in January." "But it is growing. Look." It was some kind of bulb plant, probably something Rachel had planted years ago that had gone dormant, but here it was, pushing toward life in the middle of winter. "That's stubborn," Coulter said, "or hopeful." Lynn knelt beside him, her shoulder touching his. "Maybe it knows spring is coming. Even when everything is frozen, something inside knows." He looked at her, this woman who'd survived impossible things, who'd come to a frozen mountain and somehow made it bloom again, at the tiny plant fighting its way through snow, at the smoke rising from their chimney. "Yeah," he said, "maybe it does." They stayed there looking at the green shoot for a while, neither of them saying what they were both thinking, that maybe they were like that plant. Maybe something in them had known that spring was possible even when everything looked dead. That night, Coulter did something he hadn't done in 3 years. He took Rachel's sewing basket and put it away in the bedroom trunk. Not throwing it out, not forgetting her, just making space. Lynn watched him do it, but didn't comment. "Is hard?" she asked after. "Yeah, but it's time." He closed the trunk lid. "I'll always love her. That doesn't change, but I can't keep living in the past." "No. Cannot live there and here at same time." He turned to face her. "I want to be here. With you." Fully here, not half gone. Lynn crossed the room and took his hands. I want that too. But you need to know I am not trying to replace her. Cannot replace her. I am just me. I know, and that's what I want. You. Just you. She smiled then and pulled him down for a kiss that was deeper and more sure than any they'd shared before. His hands found her waist, and hers threaded through his hair, and for the first time since Rachel died, Coulter felt like he was allowed to want something, allowed to have something. When they broke apart, Lynn's face was flushed. I think slow is maybe over now. Yeah? Yes. I think now we can be less slow. How much less slow? She laughed, the sound bright and perfect. We figure out as we go. And they did figure it out, there by the fire while snow fell outside and the cabin held them close. It wasn't smooth or perfect. There were moments of awkwardness, of hesitation, of stopping to make sure this was what they both wanted. But it was real, honest. Two people who'd survived their own kinds of winter, finally letting themselves feel warmth again. Afterward, they lay tangled together in his bed, the blankets pulled up against the cold. Lynn's head was on his chest, her hair spilling across his shoulder. No regrets? He asked quietly. No regrets? You? None. She traced patterns on his skin with her finger. Your wife. You think she would be angry about this? Coulter thought about Rachel, her kindness, her laugh, how she'd always wanted him to be happy. No, I think she'd want me to live. Really live, not just exist. Good. Because I'm not good at feeling guilty about things that feel right. This feels right to you? Yes. Strange, maybe? Unexpected. But right. She lifted her head to look at him. You feel right. He pulled her closer, pressed a kiss to her temple. Outside, the wind sang its constant song. Inside, two hearts beat in the warm dark, learning what it meant to be whole again. And somewhere in the frozen ground outside, a green shoot waited for spring, stubborn and hopeful and refusing to die. Just like them. February brought a thaw that nobody expected. The temperature climbed above freezing for 3 days straight, and water dripped steadily from the eaves like the mountain was weeping away winter. The snow turned to slush, then mud. And suddenly, the world that had been locked down for months cracked open just enough to breathe. Coulter woke on the fourth morning to find Lynn already dressed, standing at the window with her coat on. Where are you going? His voice was rough with sleep. Town. We need supplies, and I need to see people who are not you. She said it lightly, but he heard the truth underneath. Months of isolation were wearing on her. I'll come with you. Your leg is fine. Been fine for weeks. He sat up, pulled on his pants. Besides, you can't carry everything yourself. They rode down together on Bravo, Lynn sitting in front of him this time instead of behind. He kept one arm around her waist to keep her steady, and she leaned back against his chest like it was the most natural thing in the world. The trail was a mess of mud and melting snow, but Bravo navigated it carefully. As they descended, Coulter could see patches of brown earth showing through the white, the first bare ground he'd seen since October. Look, Lynn said, pointing. Flowers. She was right. Small purple flowers were pushing up through the snow at the edge of the trail. Crocuses, probably. First sign of spring. Still a month away at least, Coulter said. This is just a break in the weather. I know, but it's nice to see anyway. Rust Hollow looked different in the muddy light of late winter. Smaller, somehow, more ramshackle than Coulter remembered. They tied up outside Morrison's Mercantile, and Coulter helped Lynn down from the horse. The store was warm and crowded. Several people were inside, and all of them turned when Coulter and Lynn walked in together. The talking stopped for just a second, that noticeable pause when people were surprised, then started up again with forced casualness. Morrison came out from the back, and his eyebrows went up when he saw them. Coulter, Miss Yue, didn't expect to see you till spring thaw. Got a break in the weather, Coulter said. Figured we'd stock up while we could. Morrison's eyes flicked between them, taking in how close they stood, the way Lynn's hand brushed Coulter's arm. Right. Well, what can I get you? They went through the list: flour, salt, coffee, sugar, dried beans. Morrison filled the order without comment, but Coulter could feel the attention of everyone else in the store, the weight of their judgment, their curiosity, their disapproval. Mrs. Henderson was near the fabric section, and she made a point of turning her back when Lynn looked her way. "That everything?" Morrison asked, tallying the total. "That's it." Coulter counted out the money, overpaying slightly. "Thanks." They were loading supplies onto Bravo when Mrs. Henderson came out of the store. She walked right past Lynn like she wasn't there, then stopped beside Coulter. "Mr. Graves, I'm sorry to be forward, but people are talking." "Let them talk." "It's not proper, you having that woman living up there with you. Rachel's barely been gone 3 years, and here you are." "Here I am what, Mrs. Henderson, living my life? Trying to keep my ranch running?" His voice was harder than he meant it to be. "What exactly is your concern?" She glanced at Lynn, who was pretending to adjust the saddlebags but was clearly listening. "People will think things about her character, about yours. Then people can mind their own business. I'm just trying to help." "No, you're not. You're trying to stick your nose where it doesn't belong." He picked up the last bag of supplies. "Lynn works for me. She's been nothing but professional and hardworking, and what happens at my ranch is my affair, not yours and not the town's." Mrs. Henderson's face went red. "Well, I can see there's no talking sense to you." She hurried back into the store, and Coulter took a breath, trying to calm the anger rising in his chest. Lynn touched his arm. "Is okay. I am used to this." "Well, you shouldn't have to be." They rode back in silence, the mood from the morning gone. Coulter could feel Lynn's tension in the way she held herself, and it made his chest tight with protective fury. Halfway up the mountain, she finally spoke. "This will be problem. For you." "What will?" "Me. Living with you. People will talk, will make your life difficult. I don't care what people think. You should care. You have to live near these people. Have to do business with them." She turned slightly in the saddle to look at him. "I do not want to make your life harder. You make my life better. Everything else is just noise." "Coulter, I mean it." He tightened his arm around her. "I spent 3 years caring what people thought, trying to be what they expected, and it nearly killed me. I'm done with that. You're what matters. This is what matters." She didn't respond, just turned back around and settled against him. But he felt some of the tension leave her shoulders. When they got back to the cabin, the temperature had dropped again, and snow was starting to fall. The brief thaw was over. Winter wasn't done with them yet. That night, Lynn was quieter than usual. She cooked dinner mechanically, cleaned up without her usual efficiency, then sat by the fire staring into the flames. "Talk to me," Coulter said. "About what?" "About whatever's eating at you." She was quiet for a long moment. "In town today. The way people looked at us, the way that woman spoke to you, it reminded me of when I first came to America." "How so?" "Always being wrong thing. Wrong race, wrong gender, wrong everything. Always being thing people judge and find lacking." She pulled her shawl tighter. "I thought maybe here, on mountain, away from everyone, I could escape that. But today I remember, cannot escape what people think, goes everywhere." Coulter moved to sit beside her. "You're not the wrong anything. Those people are just small and scared and they don't know what to do with anything different. Maybe, but that does not change how it feels." "No, it doesn't." He took her hand. "But here's what I know. I don't care what they think. I care what you think. I care what I think. And I think what we have is worth 100 Mrs. Hendersons talking behind their hands." Lynn looked at him, her eyes shining in the firelight. "You are very sure about this? About us?" "I am. Are you?" She considered the question seriously. "Most of time, yes, but sometimes I'm scared. That this is temporary. That you will wake up one day and realize you made mistake. That I will be alone again." "Lynn, let me finish. I need to say this." She took a breath. "I have been alone for a very long time. Even when husband was alive, I was alone. And being with you, being not alone, it is so good I do not trust it. Good things in my life have habit of being taken away." Coulter understood that fear intimately. "I can't promise nothing bad will ever happen. Can't promise I won't die or something won't go wrong. But I can promise I'm not going anywhere by choice. You're stuck with me as long as you want to be." "How long is that?" "How long do you want?" She smiled slightly. "Maybe very long time." "Then that's how long you've got." They sat together by the fire, watching the flames dance and listening to the wind pick up outside. The thaw was definitely over. They'd be snowed in again by morning, but somehow that didn't feel like a prison anymore. It felt like safety. The rest of February and early March passed in a blur of storms and brief respites. Coulter's leg healed completely, leaving only a scar that ached when the weather changed. He got back to full work on the ranch, and Lynn fell into a routine of managing the cabin and helping with the animals when he needed it. They also settled into each other, learning the small things, how she liked her coffee in the morning, how he needed silence when he first woke up, the way she hummed when she was content, how he'd pull her close in sleep without realizing, building a life together piece by piece. One evening in mid-March, Coulter was fixing a chair leg when Lynn sat down across from him with a serious expression. "I need to ask you something." "Okay, what are we?" "To each other?" She said it bluntly, no dancing around. "Are we just living together? Are we something more?" "I need to know." He set down the chair leg. "What do you want us to be?" "I asked first." Fair enough. He thought about it, really thought about it. "I want you to be my wife, if you'll have me. Not right now, maybe not for a while, but eventually. I want this to be permanent." Her eyes widened. "You are proposing?" "I'm saying I want to. When you're ready. When we're both sure." He reached for her hand. "I love you, Lynn. I should have said it before now, but I do. I love you and I want a life with you, a real life, not just surviving together." She was quiet for a long moment, and Coulter's heart hammered in his chest. Maybe he'd said too much too soon. Maybe she didn't feel the same way. Then she smiled, a full, genuine smile that transformed her whole face. "I love you too. And yes." "Yes to which part?" "All of it. Yes, I will marry you. Yes, I want life with you. Yes to everything." She squeezed his hand. "But not right away. I need time to be sure, to know this is real and not just winter making us crazy." "How much time?" "Spring. If we still feel same way when spring comes, when we can go down to town and see other people and have options, if we still choose each other, then—" She paused. "Then we make it official. Spring it is." He pulled her into his lap, kissed her deeply. "You just made me the happiest man on this mountain." "It's not hard. You're only man on this mountain." He laughed against her mouth. "Smart ass. You like it. I love it. I love you." "Good, because you are stuck with me now." And he was, completely, utterly stuck in the best possible way. Spring came slowly, then all at once. The snow melted in rushing streams down the mountain. The trees budded green. Birds returned with their constant singing, and that little green shoot Lynn had found in January grew into a cluster of daffodils that bloomed bright yellow beside the cabin. Coulter worked from dawn to dark, repairing winter damage and preparing the ranch for the season ahead. He fixed fences, cleared deadfall, checked every building for structural issues. The work was hard but satisfying, building instead of just surviving. Lynn planted a garden where Rachel's old one had been, turning the soil and planting seeds she'd saved from town. She worked with determination, her hands in the dirt, her face to the sun. "What are you planting?" Coulter asked one afternoon, watching her work. "Everything. Vegetables, herbs, flowers, whatever will grow up here." She sat back on her heels. "Want to make this place beautiful. Want it to feel like home." "It already does." "For us, yes. But I want others to see it too. Want people from town to visit and see we have built good life." That was a new thought. "You want people to visit?" "Eventually, not now, but someday." She went back to her planting. "Cannot hide on mountain forever. At some point we have to be part of world again." She was right, but the thought of opening their life to outside judgment still made him nervous. What if they don't approve? What if they treat you badly? Then they leave and do not come back. "But Coulter," she looked at him seriously. "We cannot live in fear of what people think. Have to live our lives and let them think what they want." "When did you get so wise?" "Was always wise. You just noticing now." In late April, they rode down to town together. The trail was clear and muddy, wildflowers blooming in patches along the way. Spring had fully arrived, transforming the landscape from white death to green life. Rust Hollow was busy with the season, people planting, building, preparing for summer. Coulter and Lynn walked down the main street together, and this time he didn't let her walk behind him or apart. He kept her hand in his, making it clear they were together. People stared. Some whispered. Mrs. Henderson crossed the street to avoid them, but Old Man Morrison nodded from his store window, and the blacksmith's wife smiled at Lynn as they passed. Small acknowledgments that maybe, just maybe, some people didn't care as much as others. They went to the general store and bought supplies for the coming months. When Morrison tallied the bill, he looked at Coulter directly. "Heard you two are planning to make it official." "News travels fast. Small town, not much else to talk about." Morrison wrapped their purchases in brown paper. "For what it's worth, I think it's good." "You've been dead long enough, Coulter. Time you started living again." The words hit deeper than Morrison probably meant them to. "Thanks. That means something. Rachel was a good woman, but she's gone, and Miss Yue here is alive and standing right in front of you. Seems foolish to waste that." He handed over the packages. "My wife and we'd be happy to come to the wedding, if you're inviting people." Coulter glanced at Lynn, who looked surprised but pleased. Yeah, we'll let you know when." They left the store with lighter hearts. Maybe not everyone would accept them, but some would, and some was enough. On the ride back up the mountain, Lynn was quiet but content. When they crested the ridge and the cabin came into view, smoke rising from the chimney, garden plot greening up, everything alive and growing, she smiled. "Home," she said simply. "Home," Coulter agreed. That night they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in oranges and pinks. The air was warm, the first truly warm evening since fall. Somewhere down the mountain, a bird was singing its evening song. "Are you happy?" Coulter asked. Lynn leaned against his shoulder. "Yes, very happy." "You?" "More than I thought I'd ever be again." "Good." She tilted her face up to look at him. "I think we should get married soon, not wait." "Yeah?" "Yes. Waiting is for people who are not sure. I am sure now." "Me too." He kissed her forehead. "Next week?" "Give people time to come if they want." "Next week is perfect." They were married on a bright May morning in the yard of the cabin, with the daffodils blooming and the mountains standing witness. Morrison and his wife came, along with the blacksmith and a few others from town. Not many, but enough to make it feel real. Lynn wore one of Rachel's old dresses that she'd altered to fit her, and she'd woven wildflowers into her hair. Coulter wore his best shirt, the one she'd made him for Christmas, and he'd trimmed his beard for the occasion. Morrison's wife read from a book of poems, since there was no preacher willing to come up the mountain. The words were about love and commitment and building a life together. When it came time for vows, Coulter spoke from the heart. "I promise to love you through every season, to be there when you need me, to build a life with you that's worth living, and to never, ever take you for granted." Lynn's vows were simpler. "I promise to choose you every day, in easy times and hard times. I choose you." They sealed it with a kiss, and the small group clapped. It wasn't fancy or elaborate, but it was theirs. Afterward, Lynn had prepared food, a feast by mountain standards, and everyone ate and talked and laughed on the porch. Even Mrs. Henderson's daughter showed up, bringing a jar of preserves and an apology for her mother's rudeness. "She's old and set in her ways," the daughter said to Lynn, "but that doesn't make her right." "Thank you," Lynn said graciously. "It's kind of you to come." As the sun started to set and people prepared to leave, Morrison pulled Coulter aside. "You did good, son. Rachel would be proud of you." "You think so?" "I know so. She'd want you happy. And you look happier than I've seen you in 5 years. He clapped Coulter on the shoulder. "Take care of that woman. She's good for you." "I will." After everyone left, Coulter and Lynn stood in the yard looking at the cabin. Their cabin. Their home. Their life together. "Did you ever imagine this?" Lynn asked. "When you hired me?" "No. I was just trying to survive another winter." He put his arm around her. "Didn't imagine I'd find a reason to live instead." "I did not imagine it either. Thought I would cook your food and clean your house and be alone in a different way." She leaned into him. "But you surprised me." "Good surprised?" "Best surprised." They went inside as the stars came out. The cabin was warm and welcoming, full of the smell of food and flowers and life. They'd come a long way from that first awkward meeting in Rust Hollow, two broken people looking for something they couldn't name. That night, Lying in bed with Lynn curled against him and the mountain wind singing outside, Coulter thought about the journey that brought them here. The loss and grief and isolation. The slow healing. The choice to keep living even when it felt impossible. People talked about love like it was some magic thing that fixed everything, but it wasn't. Love was choosing someone every day, even when it was hard. Love was stitching wounds and making soup and staying through the storms. Love was building something together from the wreckage of what came before. Lynn shifted in sleep, her hand finding his. He held it gently, carefully, like the precious thing it was. The seasons would keep turning. Winter would come again, and spring after it. There would be hard times and easy times, good years and bad years. But they'd face it together, these two people who'd learned that sometimes the best things come from the worst circumstances. And maybe that was the point. Maybe life wasn't about avoiding pain or loss or hardship. Maybe it was about finding someone who'd sit with you in the darkness and wait for dawn. Someone who'd choose you when they could choose anything else. Someone who'd look at your broken pieces and see something worth keeping. Coulter had gone looking for someone to keep his cabin running. Instead, he'd found someone who made him want to run toward life instead of away from it. The cowboy and the widow. Two people Winter tried to kill. Two people who refused to die. And in refusing, they'd found something neither of them expected. A home. A love. A life that was messy and imperfect and absolutely worth living. Outside, the May wind carried the scent of growing things. Inside, two hearts beat in rhythm, and on Dead Ridge Mountain, where winter had once buried all hope, spring bloomed eternal in the space between two people who'd finally learned how to be alive again. Because that's what love was. In the end. Not the absence of pain or the promise of perfection, just two people choosing each other, day after day, season after season, building something that mattered from the raw materials of survival and hope and stubborn refusal to give up. And sometimes that was enough. Sometimes that was everything.